On the 6th day of Mirandamas, the Gallop team at the Miranda shop, they said to me, I've lost the tune of this. Why don't you do a chamble? I got there. So here I am, doing a little chatty ramble, aka chamble, which I haven't done since June. I think there was a mini chamble in September time. But yeah, for the 6th day of Mirandamas, here I am. First things first, let's not forget that, if I can find it, that the Chatty Rambles ended up with a theme tune. Do you remember? Somebody wrote this for me from the social meds.
Miranda's chatty ramble.
I love it.
Miranda's chatty ramble. Chatty ramble. Chatty ramble.
Oh, Chamble. It makes me so happy. Thank you so much to whoever wrote that. I've forgotten your name briefly. Are you enjoying the hat? I'm by the fireside, so that's the noise you can hear. A roaring fire. Look rather peaky and tired, even in the beautiful firelight. Goodness only knows what I look like in the harsh light of day, but who cares? That is not important. So listen, as per, I haven't planned anything to say, except that I do have a bit of writing by a poet and author I love called John O'Donoghue, who talks about something I've been musing on, which is this winter, as I said in a recent newsletter. If you haven't joined the newsletter, by the way, where are you? Where have you been? Missing out on the Miranda family, the Miramily. Do love a compound word. Chamble, Miramily. But yes, how this winter in particular, I mean all winters, but this winter's going to be harsher than most, but also is a time of, can be a time of rest and reflection, and working out how we want to emerge from it come the spring in a different way, and what we've learned from COVID, and how there are so many ways we don't want to go back to pre-COVID life and what it's taught us. So yeah, I think that's how I'm seeing winter, as a really beautiful, cosy, restful hunkering in my dressing gown, stained breast shelf area, natch. Time of rest and reflection. Anyway, John O'Donoghue says this, much more beautiful than what I've just said. Within the grip of winter, it is almost impossible to imagine the spring. The grey, perish landscape is shorn of colour. Only bleakness meets the eye. Everything seems severe and edged. Winter is the oldest season. It has some quality of the absolute. Yet, beneath the surface of winter, the miracle of spring is already in preparation. The cold is relenting, seeds are wakening up, colours are beginning to imagine how they will return. Then imperceptibly, somewhere, one bud opens, and the symphony of renewal is no longer reversible. From the black heart of winter, a miraculous, breathing plenitude of colour emerges. This made me smile so much. I just think that's so beautiful, the way he says that the miracle of spring is already in preparation in the cold, harsh winter. And also I love that bit, which obviously means that even when things feel desperate and we're suffering and struggling personally and globally, whether it's a global pandemic or not, that actually those times of suffering and those times are times of training. You know, those times of resistance when things are really hard, or when we grow. And actually, I've just realised I'm saying something really beautiful, but my Santa hat has gone cocked. It's riding up. Can't get comfortable. That's better. Yeah, if you're new to the Chambles, this is what it's all about. I'm now very close. I don't know. I'm on the floor. So yeah, during times of real darkness and suffering, you know, don't, I'm shifting again. Don't resist the darkness. Don't resist the resistance, because you're being prepared. You're learning so much. You're getting stronger. You're getting resilient. You're becoming kinder and more compassionate and more aware, and you'll have an amazing story to tell, and you'll no doubt help people with things that you've been through. And so in your winter, whether that comes during the actual winter or at different times, whether that's come this year, or invariably there's been suffering for all on some kinds this year, then, you know, miracles are happening within the darkness, within the personal winter. I never forget someone saying to me when they were going through the menopause, they were having a hot flush, and they said, "Oh, I'm having a personal summer." And I put that in the sitcom that Penny said. It just made me think, so I said personal winter. So like that, personal winter, whenever it comes, is like your time of real sadness, whether that and suffering, which we all experience, whether that's a week, it goes on a week, or years, or whatever we're dealt. But it can be a time of beauty, and always leads to something. What's the other thing that I thought I absolutely loved? He said, oh yeah, the colours are beginning to imagine how they will return. So again, it's like, you know, we can manifest and imagine how we want to be after suffering, after darkness, after a cold winter, after a year like this. And if we start to imagine that, then it's much more likely to happen. You know, someone said to me the other day, without a vision, without a clear vision, however small or big that may be, it's hard to sort of keep steady in a way. I think it's good to have that purpose. I mean, that for me was always getting into acting, and I used to imagine that a lot. I used to imagine being on chat shows with Michael Parkinson. Anyone old enough for Parky? He was the interviewer of the day. And I was just sort of thought I was doing that quite childishly, or just would, I mean, I suppose even in my late 20s, I would imagine that. Oh, I wonder what it would be like to meet that actress. And so all that sort of hopeful imagining can come true, and I think helps it come true if it's meant to be. And keeps you really excited and hopeful and energized to have that vision. And you might think it's so unlikely, as if, which I did with my acting career. And sometimes those desires and those visions change if they're not meant to be, and sometimes they come true. But without imagining it, without believing that it can happen, it's harder. So I love that. That reminds me to have a vision. And actually, I think I've been a bit visionless recently myself, and it definitely, that can happen in midlife, I think, when that's what ultimately the midlife crisis can be all about, is that you've achieved a lot, or you've got married, you've fulfilled a lot of the sort of key desires in life, you've got the job you wanted, or been working really hard and realise you haven't got the job you wanted and want to change, or you're coming out of a relationship, or in the thick of a long marriage if you were married young, or the kids are grown up. You've sort of done all the key things of life, so it's a time of real like, okay, what's the next vision? So yeah, so those are the two things that I think I thought of when I read that the darkness and the tough times are a time of preparation, and with a cocked Santa hat, it's important to have a vision. However crazy that vision may be. I think actually my vision is to be more peaceful. It's a smaller vision at the moment. It's to be much more accepting and trusting, and what this year has taught me is that we aren't in control, and actually it's paradoxically freeing to not be in control and just trust. We can plan what we can plan, and we can do what we can towards our personal visions, or pigeons. Doesn't quite work because it sounds like pigeon. Our pigeons, for those of you watching, if we ever meet you, please say how your pigeon's going, and we'll know we're talking about our personal visions. So yeah, I think that's my my pigeon for this winter, is And it has been this year, actually. I've learned a lot about what real trust is, what real surrender is, and how freeing that is, and how the first half of our life, any young people watching, you probably won't understand that. You're like, but I want this to happen, I don't understand, and she doesn't like me, and he doesn't like me, and I want him to fancy me, and I want her to marry me, and oh, I don't have a nice place to live, and I want this, and I want that. And that's just what the first half of life is. It's a bit of a shitty time. And I've totally lost my train of thought. What was I saying? The personal vision. Oh, trusting. So you kind of think it's all in your control and nothing will happen unless you make it. But actually, if you just take the edge off that a bit and just sort of let things unfold a bit more and take the pressure off yourself, then the things will all happen anyway, but in a much less stressed way. Yeah, and also I love what I think is really heartening is to read stories. If you're really struggling, find stories of people who've also really struggled, or watch films of people who've also really struggled. Because it's just so inspiring to see what comes from that, to see that everybody's heroicism or pigeon, or purpose or unique reason to be on the planet comes from really difficult times. And to actually see those testimonies, I think, is really important and so encouraging. I just love a biopic where you see that despite everything, their life really stands for something and they achieved so much. Or that if it wasn't for that suffering, they wouldn't be the people who they are. So that's really, I'm just repeating myself, aren't I? But I'm just thinking that I see a lot of your messages or comments on Instagram, and I'm aware of how much anxiety there is out there, and how much grief and disappointment and worry and lack of self-acceptance. And I just love you all and worry about you and want you to be free and to know that you're not alone in what you're going through. What you experience how your anxiety or fear or whatever it is manifests might be slightly different to the next person, but it's still fear. We all have fear. And it might just be turning you into who you're going to be. She says, spouting, this could be considered a bit of a microphone. Hello, testing. Nice, I look quite mad there. So on that note, I'm gonna probably end because I'm in quite uncomfortable position, squatting on the floor. Also getting very flushed. It's not a personal summer, it's the heat of the fire. But somebody sent me on the note of, my laptop is burning up from the fire. Oops. Hold it up. Imagine if it just melted in my hand. Yeah, someone who sent me an email of a story of a woman that I found really encouraging and inspiring, despite it being deeply sad, and never heard of her. She's a woman called, she was known as Sojourner, as in sojourner, journey, sojourn, Sojourner Truth, sojourn. She was born Isabella Bomfrey, stop it, in New York in 1797. Born into slavery, she was a slave for 30 years. Her brothers and sisters were sold off in infancy, and she grew up without education and remained illiterate. At the age of 9, she was sold at auction with a flock of sheep for $100. Now, already you're thinking, how can her life become, it's just awful. She was bought and sold 4 times by a succession of owners, some of whom abused her physically and sexually. She did end up marrying another slave with whom she had 5 children. Although New York State began abolishing slavery in 1799, it was a task that took another 30 years to complete. In 1826, Isabella felt led through prayer to leave her owner. She took an infant daughter, but as her other children were still legally bound as slaves, she was forced to leave them behind. Can you imagine? In 1828, she moved to New York, where she worked as a housekeeper and became involved in various churches. and started to acquire a reputation as a preacher. So already you're thinking, wow, from where she came, you know, our life stories, we're not in control of them. We just don't. It's back to surrender and trust that we do have a path. We do have a unique path. It might be coming from this extraordinary, horrendous slave background to being in a middle-class suburban cul-de-sac and suffering from anxiety and wondering what your life is going to be. And it doesn't have to be huge, you know. I think the people often who have the biggest impact are the people who stay and live locally and are a solid rock in their community and just kind and loving. And you know, but yeah, so how could she have ever planned her life, this woman? And certainly wouldn't have wanted it to start how it did, but without it she wouldn't have become who she did. Talking of which, back to the story, as a symbol of that transformation, she became a housekeeper and a preacher. She changed her name to Sojourner Truth. Her name was chosen, calling her to become a travelling preacher she felt called to be a travelling preacher who would only stay temporarily in places, sojourning in order to preach, hence sojourner. She travelled across the United States, preaching that slavery must be abolished. While slavery had been abolished in these regions, discrimination persisted, and she was frequently criticised and attacked. So you can imagine, she's doing what she felt she was called to do, and yet was continued to be abused. She increasingly spoke about social reform, whether slavery, women's rights, or prison conditions. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, she helped recruit black troops for the army, continued speaking nationally, and ended up even meeting President Lincoln. She maintained her speaking ministry until she was well into her 70s. And get this, far from being forgotten after her death, Sojourner Truth became an inspiration for subsequent generations. In 2009, this is amazing, she became the first African-American woman to have a statue in the US Capitol. And in an extraordinary gesture, NASA gave her name Sojourner to its Mars Pathfinder robotic rover in 1997. Can you imagine if the little Isabella, as a slave, brought up, being physically and emotionally and sexually abused, would think that after her death, she would be named a robot going to Mars by the American Space Association would be named after her. We're not in control, you know. We need to trust that our lives will speak for something, and that we are inherently valuable and important and loved, and are a unique blessing whatever we do. So keep thinking about your pigeons, your personal visions, imagine them, just dare to dream them, literally just lie in the bath like I did and imagine being as I did on a film set, or whatever it is. I'm now imagining being really peaceful and trusting and calmer each day, and trusting that will lead to the next thing. And I'm also imagining whether it ends up published or not, my book that I'm writing. I'm imagining it now I'm walking in a high street and I'm walking past a lovely little independent bookshop, and there it is in the window. And I'm imagining standing outside that bookshop and looking in and just smiling and knowing what it took to write that book, and there it is, and maybe seeing someone pick it up. And my mind immediately went, they go, no, just for the comedy whilst I'm watching, that would happen. But then they would actually come back and decide to watch it. Watch my book. So I think within that 20-minute ramble, there was some wisdom, some usual eccentricity. Now I'm getting very, very hot by the fire, so I'm popping off. Speak to you soon. If you haven't joined the newsletters, then please do. I'll be writing 3 for December, and then we'll see what the new year brings. Might take some time away. I'm toying with taking some time away from Instagram in January and February. Not sure yet. You can post and see what you think about that. Either it'll be a useful exercise for you, or you might go, no, we need this. We need your bauble Santa hat. And you're flushed. I look a bit like Santa now. Just need the beard. Bye.